Hello, I am Pamela Slim, the author of my most recent book, The Widest Net, in addition to Body of Work and Escape from Cubicle Nation. And the worst advice anybody ever gave me was to stop caring so much about people and instead just focus on business.
Just business. Like, isn't business people? Like, come on, right?
What is business if it's not with people? I know.
Yeah. So
Not
who
good
who
advice.
gave you that crappy advice?
It was a client back in the day. I always think people give advice with good intentions. I tend to look at the world that way, that probably they were trying to encourage me with good reason to make sure I had a solid handle on financials and looking at profitability and all these things that are super important. But it does crack me up that literally my entire career has been focused on the human side of business. So I couldn't avoid caring about people if I tried.
Wow. That's so fun though. I mean that somebody would give that meaning well, and then the opposite of that is how you built your business. That's so comical to me. So do you go back? Have you ever told that person like, "Hey, thanks for the wrong advice. I've really done the opposite and it served me well"? Or do they know even?
We actually had a conversation many years later, and it was between the time that I had known him and then I wrote my books and had built a nice online community and it helped a lot of people to start businesses. And he did comment like, "Wow, it's really amazing to see what it is that you build, and I can see you're leaning into your strengths of loving working with people." So, it's always good. I find sometimes the advice that cuts the closest can be one. Sometimes it's just straight up not true. Other times it's really just pushing up against our edge that we want to avoid. And there's always some kind of a nugget in there.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Well, it's so interesting because your new book, your latest book is The Widest Net, but we got connected like a million years ago when you wrote Escape from Cubicle Nation, which I would argue is a pretty darn small net. So how did you transition from writing about how to leave your job to now with The Widest Net? How did that happen?
I always say I am an author practitioner. And so I write about what it is that I'm working on with my clients. And I know now, I didn't actually really know when I was in the process of writing the proposal and even writing the book, that really my three books are quite a trilogy. So when you think about the work that for me for about 10 years was focused at Escape from Cubicle Nation, that started with my blog, as you know, and then turned into a book, that it was just really focused on that journey of helping people who were in corporate, who felt unhappy, to leave with an actual viable plan where they would not experience financial hardship. It's really easy just to say, screw the man, take his boot off your neck and start your own business. Very, very different story to actually have a viable business idea, the wherewithal and the skills and tools to build a business. And one, especially for a lot of people I worked with, that might give you the level of income that you were used to when you were working sometimes for a couple decades within a corporate career, which of course means you've gained a lot of, raises and things like that. So that book, I often think for any field of study that we have, when you really begin to look at it, even though it is a niche and helping, I always described it as in all the like old Harrison Ford movies where somebody would be chasing him and he's like running with either a ball running behind him or somebody with a spear, and then they would get to the edge of the cliff and it seems like it was just going to drop off and there was this magic bridge that just appeared to cross over. That's what it felt like to me in that work with Escape from Cubicle Nation, but it really was miles and miles deep because there's so much that's involved in that period. So doing that work for a long time, then I started to notice that some people would quit. It wasn't for them and they were feeling shame. And there was all of this, a lot more people that were entering in the space saying you're only cool and creative if you work for yourself, which is totally not true. Right? You've worked for organizations, you've worked for yourself. There's nothing magical about any work mode. To me, it was really, what is that work that you're building that's meaningful to you? And for body of work, I said it's everything you create, contribute, affect, and impact throughout the course of your life. So body of work was really more about what do you want to create with a real connection to work that's meaningful and legacy work for you. And then naturally, as my clients started to do that, and I'm working a lot more with helping people to build their body of work, they need to find an audience for it. And I found that a lot of the advice that was out there was looking at business as empire building, where it's all about the empire of Phil. You have to say, everybody else is wrong. I'm the only right person. We all need to join the cult of Phil, with your special t-shirts or whatever it is that you have. And I love you. I would totally wear the shirt for sure, like without even being asked. But I do not find it to be true at any point in my career to think that any of us are smart enough and have all the resources to completely solve the problem for our customers. I've always worked with this principle of ecosystems, with many people working together to solve problems. And I've found it is a method and a perspective that's really helpful for people who are trying to expand their audience for their business.
Absolutely, especially as a service-based business. It's probably the strongest thing that I've read that explains how to actually do that. Because I hear it, right? You hear that all the time. Find your tribe, which many people think that means find your customers. And I would argue your goal is to find that ecosystem, right? The peanut butter to your jelly, as you like to call it, right? Your PB&J folks that help you come together. So I mean, who hit you over the head with the PB&J, or has that been hitting there for a while? Because I love that analogy so much. When I heard that, I'm like, that's what I've been trying to do my whole business life.
Totally. Well, and I will say, just from an inclusion lens, because my husband is Navajo,
I would love it exactly.
If we didn't use the whole find.
That's what. Tribe. Yeah, I was going to say that too. Yeah, absolutely. Right. I mean, I was going to go to that offensive piece as well, but Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can't, it's really the core of work that we do. And it is the basic premise is such, yes, that we're looking for people who we really relate to, who are ideal customers. We're looking for partners we enjoy. As I said, the PB&J, it was really funny because when I was writing the proposal, I worked with my friend, David Moldauer, what used to be a senior editor at Portfolio, which was the publisher of my first two books.
Yeah.
I did this book with McGraw-Hill. I love David so much, and I love working with somebody that really pushes me and pushes back on ideas. It's really good, even though I'm like resistant in the moment. But he was like, PB&J strategy, really? And I was like, yes, PB&J strategy, because I love coming up with concepts that are just memorable and cheesy. Like sometimes it's just really helpful to have that, and you automatically think about that, right? It's just like PB&J. Like if you have this, then you need that. From a service-based perspective, and in the work I do every day, I'm a business coach, so I work with people in strategy. And every single day, my PB&J partners are my intellectual property attorney, who I refer people to for agreements. I work with graphic designers. I work with website builders. Work with people that have specific expertise in messaging and branding. And so all of these are people who I literally am referring my clients to all the time. So my clients, if they need me, then they probably need those other people. Many times when I come and I work with somebody, they're already working with other people. And when you think about it, for the person who they're working with, who they really love, who is their intellectual property attorney or their web developer, that web developer probably has a bunch of customers that I actually really know, and that would be a perfect fit for my business. Some of them I might know because we're connected through social. Other people, then I may really not know, and it's a really great way to get exposure to new audiences.
Yeah, I think that in many ways it's so elementary and so often overlooked, right? If they need me, then they need these other people. And then looking the other way, well, if those people, right, that's the old circle of influence conversation that a lot of financial planners talk about. But I think that's so important, right? Who is that? And you call it an ecosystem. And I think that's very interesting to me, right? Because an ecosystem to me is a living, breathing thing. It's not just a piece of paper, right, on things. So talk to me a little bit about your Widest Net ecosystem and why that's so foundational to what you're talking about here in the Widest Net.
Yeah, so it is a method, as you and I have talked about, where there are 10 steps in the method, and each step is a chapter. So being a business coach, I'm really about process, and one thing is really connected to the other. So when you first start with knowing what your mission is, what your values are, and then really focusing on defining your ideal client by problem or challenge. So for example, I often work with people who have amazing intellectual property. They've written books or they have methods, and they want to scale and maybe start to license it, right? They want to find new markets in order to really scale their IP. That's a specific problem that I help people solve. With that definition of problem, I want to look at for that my ideal customer when they are trying to solve that problem to scale their business. Who are all the people in the ecosystem? And in my model, I have 10 different segments of the ecosystem wheel. But who are the people who they're looking to for advice, inspiration, tools, resources? So they can be people like software companies that might create, Proposify or something, Bid Sketch that helps people to create proposals to be selling their licensed products to larger companies. They will be looking for things like intellectual property attorneys, who I work with. They may go to events that are large events that teach them about how they can scale their business. So maybe like the, Inc. Conference that they have where they're surrounded by people who are in fast, high growth companies for inspiration. And also they're looking to media hubs. They're probably listening to podcasts, something like Brian Clark's 7-Figure Small that I talk about in the book, where they're trying to learn how to do something effectively. So I argue that people already have an ecosystem around them of places where they're looking for information, resources, and support. And it's our job to get to know that and also to be bringing the very best resources into that ecosystem or identifying the best players. I just wrote a post for my newsletter yesterday where I think about the metaphor like the Justice League. I don't know if people are DC or Marvel, so let's not have a fight, about this. But if you think about if you had 30 minutes to save the earth, like with your work, if I need to just solve the problem immediately, who would be those superheroes in the Justice League that I would pull together to get that done? Just the very best people. I have to know who they are, and I have to introduce them to my clients. And then I think it's the very best strategic referral strategy. When you have those players, that is probably more than enough than any service-based business needs in order to get clients or customers for a good long time.
Wow. That's awesome. I love thinking about that as superheroes in your Justice League. That's so good. I would argue that the Justice League is probably more applicable to business. Avengers is more backstory. And so I'm with you there. Even though I'm an Avengers fan, I will tell you, I think you're right in this metaphor. So that's good, right? But I think that's really good. And to your point, they all meet up at the Hall of Justice, which is your events. They have an opportunity here to get together and to connect. So I dig that. I'm going to buy that metaphor and wholehearted, hook, line, and sinker, whatever you want to call it. Although my favorite are the Wonder Twins, because I believe there's someone just like me that I need to partner with that we can make things even better. So there you go.
I love that.
Yeah. So yeah, Zane and I believe Jana is the name, but I can't remember. So if anybody's listening, thinking, who the heck are the Wonder Twins? Just Google Wonder Twins Justice League. You'll find them.
Check it out now as soon as we
right?
get off of this.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So with that, right, I love the idea of that ecosystem. I love the idea of advice and tools and inspiration, resources, all that stuff. So good. With that, one of the things that you talk about also is then a seeding plan. Seeding, SEED, seeding plan, yes. Not seeding, where everybody sits in the Justice League. So to be clear,
so right. Johnny Appleseed sprinkling.
Right,
seeds. Yes,
that's right. Yeah. So let's talk about that. Let's talk more about the seeding plan and how we do that sprinkling in strategic ways instead of just casting just an empty net full of holes.
Yeah. This model, the strength of it, and also the thing that I think can feel overwhelming for people conceptually at first, is when you do begin to look at the ecosystem wheel and just recognize how many places and connections there actually are for you to be connecting with an ideal client. Just as an example, if you and I do coaching, right, of business people, and you make them stronger in sales, and for me, kind of business model and marketing. So if you were to go and you were to say, okay, a peanut butter and jelly partner that would be great for me would be financial planners, people who are actually helping people when they're making all this money with your advice, now that you're teaching them how to sell, in order to have really good financial advice. And they might go to financial planners anyway to look for their retirement plans and 529 plans and all that. So imagine that you were to have a marketing strategy just to do presentations at associations of financial planners. And you are probably to choose like the very best conferences with the best other speakers. So strategically, you could maybe think of, 2 a year that would be just the absolute best ones. And then you could be doing all kinds of virtual connections. I have seen people absolutely destroy their sales goals, like just with one tiny strategy like that of focusing in on a part of the ecosystem wheel. So once you do the big picture and you begin to identify the places, then you need to get very specific. So it's looking wide and then getting very specific into what I call tiny marketing actions, where you can evaluate, where the places where you're the most energized to connect. What are the ways for you that are the best? Are you more introverted or extroverted? What is your wingspan, as I call it, in terms of the amount of connections that you can really hold, like emotionally and tactically? And then you're going to want to create a plan where you come up with very specific actions that you execute in small ways over time. So for example, if you know that there are some of these great peanut butter and jelly partners, a couple of the examples in the book, my client Heather Krause, who started We All Count, which is a data equity training firm. She's a data scientist and trains other data scientists. And she was hilarious, as a very self-identified introvert. She said, if I went to the Starbucks in my neighborhood and they begin to know my name, I will drive 10 miles in order to go somewhere else where they don't. And she was like, I was not looking to build a community. But with a very specific objective, where there are some of these peanut butter and jelly partners, what she did is to set a goal where each month she'd be connecting with them, have a short 15-minute, very defined kind of conversation. We developed a script that really helped her, not a stuffy, awkward script, just a guideline of here are the kinds of questions to dig into to make the conversation flow smoothly. So examples like that of coming up with seeding activities that are really good. Another one, I know you've called me on my birthday before, right? I think we're in each other's phone.
Every year, yep.
And so that's an example to me of, I don't feel like, oh, Phil is planting a seed so that I refer people to him for sales coaching. I think about like, oh my God, my friend Phil, who I love so much, who I haven't seen in a while, is being really thoughtful. And I know, because I know who you are, it is something that you've thought through. Like, what do you like to do? What are communication means that really work for you? And you're choosing an activity to do consistently in small ways that's going to make a difference over time that people remember. So a seeding plan is really being prepared and organized to know what activities that you would do for tiny marketing actions. And then just creating space. Literally, it can be 5 or 10 minutes a day. It does not have to be bigger than that, just to be seeding these connections. And it works. Like, part of what made me so amazed and motivated to write this book is my clients use these methods, and boy, did it work. It really does. It takes a little time, but it really makes a big difference.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I love, you actually share Heather's outline of her conversation flow in the book, which I found helpful, because for me, I can get so far afield. Like, I get tiny marketing actions. The problem is, once I do that 2 minutes, then I ramble on for 15 more and I get off script, right? I get off track. And I think that's the case for extroverts. So whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, being intentional about it, putting a box around it, and a script or some framework, if you will, some outline of what to talk about, I think is really helpful. And you do a great job in the book of sharing that. And I really appreciate that, because that, as I read that, I'm like, aha! I'm going to steal something like that, because I'm going to use that. That's really, really good and really helpful. So thank you for that.
It can keep you on track. One of the things that's the hardest, which is kind of funny, is in actually just staying in an initial connection conversation and not feeling like you have to go into some, well, hey, let's partner, or I have this service, and begin to sell. It actually can really help you to know the only thing I'm here to do is to ask somebody questions about themselves, get to know them, share a little bit. And then if I know in advance what might be a good way to sign off, kind of based on the vibe, then it just makes it easier. I can relax into it. And as you said, even I'm a very much of a raging extrovert. I can talk to anybody. And there are times where I'm like, geez, I just really said too much. Why did I do that? And these kinds of guides can just help me to stay grounded into what the purpose is.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. So a couple more things here. I also, I've got the method here in front of me. And one of the things that I thought was really strong was your lighting a beacon method here. You've got a beacon planner in the book that's really strong. So explain what that means to light your beacon, and how we can do that even better.
A beacon is something that I realized, and I started my blog, Escape from Cubicle Nation, in 2005. So just celebrated 16 years. And there are many people who were there before me, but it was in the big picture of like the evolution of social media, it was a little bit earlier. And I remember back in the day, it was just something I was a blogger. It was a known thing, as that was really my primary vehicle for communication. Now that we have so many different communication vehicles, so we have social media, TikTok and Instagram and Snapchat and Facebook and Twitter, and then we have so many ways that we can be communicating. We can have a podcast, we can do live streams like this, you can have a blog, an email newsletter. I find that when you're thinking about, for you as a thought leader, and this really is not only for service professionals like you and me, where the way I define thought leadership in the book is just your specific point of view about how you think the problem should be solved for the problem you solve for your clients. That's your thought leadership, your unique contribution. So from that perspective, if people really want to get to know what is that point of view and what are you about and how are you really diving deep into your particular intellectual property and your point of view, you want to have a central place in which people can find that. And so having something like a choice, I prefer something that you can own primarily for your beacon. So that would be a podcast or an email list, and not social media. We've seen folks get kicked off of social media. Sometimes you can build a really big audience and then not have access to it. But if you have a primary beacon that you use to communicate, it needs to be something that is a medium that you enjoy. And it also is a medium where your ideal clients are looking for information, and also that you have the resources to produce content for your beacon in a way that's consistent and is really helpful and effective. With that, of course, you're going to share it in social media satellites. It makes perfect sense if you're going to take the time to write a post for your newsletter. Like I just wrote an article yesterday. I cross-posted on my blog. I share it on social media. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's really thinking about what is your primary beacon where people can get to know your point of view. And we see people really digging down in that. Brene Brown, I think, is really zeroed in on podcasts as her beacon, especially, through quarantine. She has a deal with Spotify for her two podcasts. And another example I use for an email newsletter is James Clear, who wrote Atomic Habits. And he is all in on his newsletter. He's very consistent. He's got, I think, over 1 million subscribers. And it's a way for people to really get to know your work.
Wow. I think that's super important as well. I really enjoy your definition of thought leadership, that it's your specific point of view about how you think the problem should be solved. You don't have to be a service-based professional to have this. I think this is really important to say. Stacy says that she likes that definition as well. So thank you, Stacy, for chiming in on that. And I really think that that's central to the book and central to your business has got to be where you show up strongly, right? That your beacon is your brightest light, and it's your biggest opportunity to get with people. So why do you think people resist that, Pam? I think that, when I coach folks, right, they're like, well, I don't know, I don't have time, and I'm just going to spread myself really thin. Like, what do you say to that, and how do you help with that?
Dr. Phil's one good question. How's it working for you? That actually is the greatest question of all time. All time.
Wow.
So, be like, great, we'll roll with that. And then, let's check in a couple weeks or months and see how it works. It's a little passive aggressive. I like to have fun with my clients. But really, I think one of the reasons why we do our taxes and why we care about having a good credit score is that you will go to jail if you don't file your taxes over a long period of time. And you cannot access resources in the world if you don't work on your finances. It's a hard thing that I know a lot of people really struggle with, right? But it's because there's some kind of metric there that's really tangible. It tells us we are going to comply and do that because we have to do it. That's part of why we get our finances in order. There's nothing on that same level, not that I'm advocating for the government to step in and make sure that you market and sell in your business. I am not advocating that. But think about it for a second, that we look at marketing operations as a nice to have in our business. A business literally is built upon the premise that you need leads and customers in order to survive. It is not optional, just like it's not optional to not file your taxes. So I often work with people, I think what stops people is they're not doing a realistic strategic analysis about the amount of time that you need to devote to marketing activities. And if you're not really a marketing person, that's totally fine. You need to designate resources to hire somebody who can do that function for you in your business. And it's just one of those things. Sometimes you can be in a business that has natural referrals, or it's something where you're, an expert in an area. I've seen too much. I've been in business for 25 years, and I've seen a lot in my own business and my husband's business and so many clients over the years. Unexpected stuff happens. And so I would always rather that you have an abundance of opportunities, that you've taken the time to dial in some of your marketing operations so that you do have more opportunities in case things shift unexpectedly, which
Wow.
they always do.
Yeah,
Always.
right. Yeah, I mean, it's
Always.
not every year that we get a pandemic, but something happens, right? Something always happens to cause that. And I think, to your point about going back to your peanut butter and jelly, if sales is your strength, you still need marketing to help that. If marketing
Yeah.
is your strength, you still need sales. And
Yes.
I really think that, to your point, I think we gravitate to what we're strong in
Yeah.
and what we enjoy far more than we gravitate to what we need. I think
That's
that's our
right.
challenge with this stuff, right? So how do we make this more is there a scoreboard that you use for your marketing that you say, okay, this is how I know I'm being successful?
You do not have to make me, you have to make me do my bookkeeping and do my taxes. Like, thank you, IRS, and my wonderful accountant. I've actually come around where I enjoy it more than I used to. I naturally do marketing myself every day. It's how I'm wired. I literally have conversations in the Starbucks drive-through every morning when I come by. I know the folks who were there. I know what businesses their parents are working on. I know their career strategies. So it's like that is who I am. And so I know that I'm generally doing my activities. If I have something like a book, then of course I'm going to create a more specific strategy, like to do 100 podcasts or conversations, right, in the month leading up to the book. But for my clients, one of my clients, Carly Cunningham, who so bravely shared her story in the book, she's from Big Bold Brand, one of my dear friends before I started working with her. And she shows up right in the very beginning of the introduction of this book. But was one of those people that just is extremely talented at what she did and had a bunch of projects and just leaned into doing them, forgot to continue seeding, and all of a sudden found herself in this perfect storm of just not really having leads. So Carly is actually the one that I really give credit for the tiny marketing actions process. I think I was just being goofy. It was like TMA, like TMI, TMA. And I thought about, we worked together to define some of these specific seeding activities she could do. She created a journal that was specific to tiny marketing actions. She got gold stars, so she would give herself gold stars. She's a very competitive person. She was a competitive athlete. And so she loves putting in a system in which she can show that she's making progress. She actually, for the book, I'll have to share this in a blog post or something, she's done a whole strategic analysis through spreadsheets of the years we've worked together, her patterns of tiny marketing actions, and the correlation between her opportunities and her sales as a result of doing it. I love people like Carly, but she needed to have a system to track it. She loves to connect, but she's one of those people, like many, that love their clients, just get busy doing the work that you do, and you forget to seed new opportunities.
Yeah, so being intentional, having that, even if you do it naturally, is super important. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a great lesson for us. And with that, if we didn't have marketing, it's hard sometimes to make sales. And I love your sales checklist in the book, Pam. Let's talk about that a little bit, because you've got 4 steps there that many miss. The last one. So the mission, okay, I got that, right? How am I serving? Why am I serving? What's my
Yeah.
big purpose? Got that. I do some preparation. Okay, got that, right? Do my research. I have that process. But then you talk about onboarding. And I think that's so often missed. So
Yeah.
as we talk about sales, that's really the last piece of it. We make the sale, that's great, but we didn't deliver squat yet. So how do we between delivery point and sale, how do we onboard? Why is that so important?
Yeah, and I will just say, for so many of my clients, the sales experience is one that where they can get much more comfortable with marketing and connecting. A lot of people don't understand the difference My friend Michelle Woodward would always say, marketing is what you do to get your phone to ring or your email box to ding, and sales is what happens once you get on the phone, begin to have a conversation. And a lot of people get stuck and feel like they have to become a different person, which obviously is awkward for everybody involved. So when you have a good process and you're qualifying people and having good conversations and learning about them and putting together a proposal, it can feel like for you as the business owner, the culmination of everything when that person signs. So they sign the contract, they pull out their credit card and make payment, they give you a check. From your mind, you can feel like, yes, I have that person. I'm excited about doing the work. Now my sales goals are on track for the quarter. And a common behavior that we can have, myself included, is to be like, okay, relieved. I can't wait to start working with that person. Now I'm going to go try to get some more sales in order to reach my overall goals. In the meantime, that person who has been through this very relational journey with you, if you've been doing it right, with a good follow-up, having good conversation, getting great access to information and feeling comfortable enough to sign up to work with you, that period between when they decide that they're going to do it and when you have your first kickoff and when you start to work together is often a period where trust can either be built or it can be lost. And it often is because of not having a really strong process of onboarding. This is something that my colleague, Lavista Jones, who I also quote in the book, that's from 31 Marketplace, she really instilled in me, because that's a lot of the work that she does with clients. We work together a lot with our clients here at the Main Street Learning Lab. And she really impressed on me that it's so important to have things prepared, have things automated as much as possible, to give people a roadmap for what the work's going to be, and to make sure that the experience is consistent from what it's been in a marketing experience. Otherwise, it feels really yucky, and it can give people the experience of like, oh, I thought I was really set to work with this person, but everything kind of changed as soon as I signed the contract. And that's, I know, not what you want as the business owner. I know for me, in cases where I messed that up, it wasn't because I was intentionally trying to harm that person or I didn't care. It was that I hadn't put the attention and energy into making the onboarding exceptional.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if we have somebody else that's going to be part of our solution.
Mhm.
If we work real hard to sell and we don't put any energy into onboarding, it feels like a handoff where you drop the baton.
Yeah.
And it's really tough, right? So I think that's super, super important. I appreciate you sharing that. Lavista Jones is the person that you mentioned in the book, which is really
Yes.
great. The book is The Widest Net, which is fantastic. Congratulations, Pam, once again, on a great book.
Thank you, Phil.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So if folks want to get started casting the widest net and get started, obviously they should buy the book. Let's be clear, right? It's a great book. If you buy it, Pam's got a great workbook that goes along with it that you can get, download, and fill out. But where should people get started along this journey, the getting started creating their own widest net?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably what every author says, but it is one of the reasons to write the book, is to give context behind what advice is. And for me, being a strategic business person, we so often jump to tactics first, just trying a bunch of things, maybe reaching out and connecting with peanut butter and jelly partners before doing the first part, which is really understanding, why are you in business? Why do you care about what it is that you deliver? Who are you as a person? What's really important to you in terms of your values and what you're looking for to work with in people? And I think when you do some of that upfront work, it's going to make the process of discovering partners to collaborate with so much easier, because the ecosystem of the total amount of people who are working to solve the problem for your ideal clients is extremely big. The ecosystem of people who you would trust the relationship with your clients and customers with is usually a bit of a smaller circle. And so in order to really know how you approach it, I recommend getting really clear as to who you are, what's important to you, what are your values, why are you in business, and then who is your ideal client, focused on the problem or challenge that they have. So don't define it as a woman between the age of 45 and 55. Define it by what is this business or life problem that you're helping them solve, and then you're going to begin to connect with other people who are equally passionate about solving that problem.
Awesome. Great advice on getting started. One last comment here from Stacy. Okay, she says, Pam, your book's changed my life. Look forward to reading The Widest Net. And I'll tell you, Stacy, this book is her best one yet. So, folks, if you're listening, it's true, Pam. If folks are listening, absolutely get yourself a copy of The Widest Net. It's a fantastic book. If you want to get connected more with Pam, she's been generous and shared her LinkedIn profile at /Pamela Slim, or follow her on Twitter /Pam Slim, and get to know her. Your work is awesome, Pam. I always appreciate the time we get together, and I thank you so much for writing this book because so many of us need it. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil.
My pleasure. And thanks everyone for listening, for watching. Now go get The Widest Net.